He wasn't just a man who helped raise her children. He was the silent guardian, the one who paid the bills and stood firm beside their mother for 25 long years. Yet, at the will reading, Leonard was left with nothing but empty hands and a heavier heart. The true inheritance, it had yet to be revealed. The law office breathed silence, broken only by the lazy spin of a ceiling fan and the faint rustle of papers. Late afternoon sun slipped through tall windows, casting long shadows over gleaming oaken shelves of leather-bound law books that watched like unblinking witnesses. A silver tray bore cold coffee and neglected shortbread, victims of the brewing storm. Leonard sat slightly apart, hands folded, his crisp suit belying the exhaustion in his eyes. He didn't utter a word, because sometimes silence says everything. Across the room, Helen's children, Clara, Andrew, and Mitchell, wore black but radiated impatience, their murmurs ceasing only to shoot icy glances at Leonard. To them, he wasn't the man who helped raise them. He was an unwelcome ghost in their family story. Never a dad slipped from their lips. Clara, the oldest, tapped away on her phone like she was swiping through a catalog of grievances. Andrew was glued to his watch, as if counting down to freedom. Mitchell lounged with the swagger of a king in exile, but none of them glanced at Leonard. They never had. Leonard, however, had a memory carved in stone. He recalled the hours spent driving Clara across state borders because airports set her nerves ablaze. He remembered quietly covering Andrew's first car payments when the kid's wallet fell short. He remembered gambling his own home on Mitchell's doomed coffee shop dream, a venture as short-lived as a caffeine buzz. Throughout it all, Leonard had been Helen's silent partner, never doubting her loyalty for a second. But Leonard learned love's not always unconditional. 25 years with Helen, filled with cozy nights, shared stories, whispered dreams. She called him her rock, but right now, surrounded by legal tomes and cold judgments, Leonard felt like driftwood tossed on a merciless sea. He looked down at the modest gold band snug on his finger, a ring that never left him since that small courthouse ceremony, witnessed only by Helen's closest friend. Her children, they'd walked away from that day. He remembered Helen's shaky apologies for their absence, like a haunting echo. "It doesn't matter," Leonard said then, masking the hurt with a smile. "What matters is us." That was their truth, until this room full of perfumes and silk reminded him otherwise. He wasn't family, not to them. They barely put up with him. Polite nods, the kind you give a dog that's sitting by your feet, but you'd rather it wasn't there. Their smiles were measured, careful performances masking the real feelings. Simmering bitterness, cold doubt, the discomfort of wealth confronting authenticity. Leonard wasn't one of them. No lineage, no club invitations. What he had was something richer, loyalty forged in fire, hard-won wisdom, and a love so deep it didn't need gold to shine. So he held his tongue, letting memories of Helen swirl in the still air until the lawyer cleared his throat and spoke. "Thank you all for gathering today to honor the last will and testament of Helen Grace Whitmore." Leonard's heart tightened at the formal sound of her full name. Helen always insisted on Len, their secret handshake, soft and intimate. He glanced at her children. Clara's arms folded like a fortress, her face already bored. Mitchell was calculating his expected cut with the precision of a stockbroker. Andrew just wanted this over. Leonard breathed deeply. He wasn't chasing a payout or approval. He came for peace. But beneath his calm exterior, a quiet voice whispered that this sunlit afternoon would tear open old wounds, and the truth, waiting behind polite words, would crash through the room like a storm. Adjusting his glasses, the lawyer's voice cut through the tense silence like a sharp knife through velvet. "To my cherished daughter Clara, I bequeath the upstate lake house including all furnishings. Clara sat straighter, lips curling into a grin that screamed victory. No attempt to hide it. Leonard's eyes flicked sideways, but his face betrayed nothing. That house was Helen's refuge, but it was Leonard's sweat that rebuilt the porch, laid the garden's stepping stones, and carved the study's shelves with his own hands. The lawyer went on. To my son Andrew, I leave my investment portfolio, valued near $850,000, and my personal shares in Whitmore Holdings. Andrew exhaled quietly, mouthing a thankful yes. Leonard recalled Helen's vow to keep those stocks intact unless dire need arose. Seems sharing with Leonard didn't qualify. To Mitchell, the reading continued. I leave grandmother's heirloom jewelry, the sapphire ring, emerald brooch, and the vintage Cadillac, which Leonard lovingly maintained. Leonard blinked, remembering weekends spent elbow-deep in grease beneath that car. Not for Mitchell, who couldn't even turn the key, but because Helen insisted it be preserved, a relic now destined for neglect. With every line, Leonard's heart beat slower. He said nothing, moved not a muscle, but inside a quiet ache blossomed, not for the items, but for the crushing thought. Had he ever truly belonged? The lawyer shuffled papers again. To my second cousin Eleanor, I leave the antique china set she admired at the holidays. Leonard almost smiled, just a flicker. Eleanor, the family's rarest visitor, had dropped by once in 10 years, late and ghost-like, gone before anyone noticed. Yet even she earned a line in the will's recital. Leonard sat, waiting for a sign, his name, a glance, anything to honor the silence. But the lawyer's monotone cut through the room, pulling Leonard's mind to distant memories. Almost 3 decades ago, Helen had hired him to redo her kitchen, fresh from divorce, sharp as broken glass, but still warm underneath. He pictured her barefoot on the cracked linoleum, arms crossed like a general surveying a battlefield, pointing at cabinets destined to vanish. "You're the contractor, right?" she asked, suspicion heavy. Leonard nodded, stifling a grin. "Only if you don't mind the chaos." No laughter then, but it came. 3 weeks in, sharing sandwiches and broken family tales, Helen confessed she trusted no one. Leonard didn't push. Love tiptoes, never shouts. It came slow, like soft waves. Coffee left on the counter, a blanket folded on the porch swing. Then came dinner, her hands trembling as she asked, "Just dinner." After that, the waters churned. Her kids hated him. Handyman was their insult, sometimes thrown like stones at Leonard's face. Helen defended him at first, then softened for peace. "They just need time," she said, head resting on his chest. "Not used to someone like you." Leonard swallowed that weight, excluded not just by money or degree, but by something unseen. It was stitched into his very being, his skin, his story, his quiet endurance. Yet he stayed. Paid for Clara's private school when her father fled like a bad stock, covered Andrew's tuition at Yale, and backed Mitchell's second business gamble after the first crashed and burned. No credit, no parades, just because Helen loved those kids and because he loved Helen. Love to Leonard meant stepping onto an empty stage when no one's clapping. And here he was, surrounded by a crowd that never cheered once. The lawyer cleared his throat, eyes sweeping the room like a conductor ready for the final chord. "We're near the end of Mrs. Whitmore's will. A few closing remarks." Leonard straightened, gaze fixed. Maybe now, the moment he'd been waiting for. The lawyer's voice softened, the gravity thickening the air. He smoothed the last page, glanced around, then read, "To my beloved husband Leonard, I leave my gratitude." The room sucked in a collective breath, quiet, sharp, like a sudden gust blowing out candles. Even the hum of the AC seemed to pause. All eyes locked on Leonard. He didn't flinch, didn't utter a word, just sat frozen, spine stiff, fingers twitching like a pianist itching to play. Gratitude. 2 small words. For 25 years of marriage, Sacrifices unsung, a family that wasn't truly his, just a whispered thank you in legalese. The lawyer faltered, unsure what to say next. Leonard blinked twice, still as a statue, the hurt wrapped in quiet dignity. He stared at the lawyer's documents like they were hieroglyphs he desperately needed to decipher differently, but the script was stubborn, cold and unmoved. Helen was history, and this paper was her final judgment. No house, no bank accounts, no token of recognition, just silence. Meanwhile, Mitchell lounged back with a grin, arms crossed like he'd just claimed a throne. Clara shot Andrew a glance, eyebrows shooting skyward, and Andrew responded with a muffled snort. Then the murmurs started, quiet, cruel, and cutting. Guess he finally knows his place. Leonard felt every word hammering into his chest like a betrayal tattoo, but he kept his silence. He stood slowly, draping his coat around himself like a shield against a betrayal colder than winter. His face gave away nothing, but his eyes flickered with the sharp sting of being blindsided by someone you trusted without question. A single nod to the lawyer, a silent vow to keep his dignity intact even when the world refused it. Then he walked out. His footsteps echoed, slow and heavy, across the marble floor. No backward glance, no collapse, just a small, quiet wipe of his eye before he disappeared through the door. Outside, the sun still shone, but failed to warm. The city throbbed with noise, cars honking, feet rushing, a delivery guy yelling at his phone about an order. The world spun on, oblivious to the heartbreak left behind. Leonard paused at the curb. The traffic light flickered green. Still, he didn't step forward. He stood still, eyes glazed, lost in nothingness. His reflection in the glass was a man who'd handed over everything only to be handed back emptiness. The quiet mornings when he brewed Helen's coffee before she stirred, the warmth of her laugh after he fixed the heater on bone-chilling winter nights, silent acts of love without expectation, the anniversaries he marked like sacred altars, defending her kids even when they spat disrespect. He did it all for love's sake. No medals, no applause, but this silence, this final erasure, it hit like a hammer he hadn't seen coming. His shoulders sagged under the blow. A pedestrian brushed him by, whispering, "Sorry." Leonard barely noticed. His thoughts churned. Why? Why did she leave me with nothing? Had he been deceived? Was her love a mask? Was her quiet acceptance of her children's disdain a tacit betrayal? Had he been a convenience? He wanted to scream, but Leonard's rage was always a whisper, not public. The world expected his anger. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction. So he walked past the bank where their shared life was deposited, past the flower shop blooming with tulips, swallowed by the heavy silence of the afternoon. Answers? Out of reach. 3 days gone by. Leonard ignored every call. The house was Clara's now, by law. He stayed locked in a rented room, surrounded by boxes that held too many memories, too much weight. No tears came, not because he didn't feel the urge, but because the hurt was lodged in a place where tears couldn't swim, somewhere deep beneath the skeleton of his grief, the kind of hurt that whispers in silence. Then, on the fourth morning, the unexpected showed up, a timid tap on the door. Leonard opened it, but the doorstep was empty, except for a courier's envelope lying there like a secret waiting to be cracked open. His name sprawled across the front in a handwriting he recognized instantly. Helen's. His breath caught in a familiar snag. The paper was time-worn, the ink blurred, like a note written in a rush or between tears. He shut the door softly, sat on the edge of the messy bed, and with hands that quivered like leaves on a breeze, peeled open the envelope. Inside, a folded letter and a smaller envelope marked, "For the attorney." Leonard unfolded the letter, and with every line, the air around him grew heavy. "My dearest Leonard," it read, "if you're reading this, I'm already gone, and I fear I've broken your heart. Please, before you judge me too harshly, let me explain. I meant to leave you everything. You deserve the stars and more. But my children came to me months ago, threats spilling like poison. They said if I left you a single crumb, they'd challenge the will, drag your name through mud, label you a gold digger. Lies that burn like acid. The harder I resisted, the sharper their claws. And Leonard, I was afraid, not for myself, but for your peace. I didn't want your twilight years spent fighting scavengers, so I made 2 wills, one for them, a decoy. I wanted to see their true colors when they thought the treasure was theirs, and I wanted you to see the truth behind the smoke. The authentic will, the real plan, lay folded inside the second envelope. Within were the keys to the trust Helen had forged just for Leonard, the house, stocks, properties, art, bank accounts, all held in his name. He never asked for it. She gave anyway. For 25 years, Helen had been quietly weaving a life for him, a gift in exchange for the sanctuary he gave her. Leonard, you saved me. You gave me dignity, safety, a love without conditions, things no money could buy. Forgive the illusion I left behind. I wanted truth to unfold in its own time. And now it has. The words blurred as Leonard read, then reread the letter. Each time, the stabbing pain in his chest softened, replaced by a new feeling he hadn't welcomed since that law office meeting. Relief. Not because of money or property, but because Helen had truly seen him. She hadn't abandoned him. She'd shielded him with a quiet brilliance only she possessed. He lifted the second envelope, opened it slowly. Inside were the official papers, notarized documents, bank accounts, deed transfers, and at the very last page, a mission statement, a promise sealed in ink. Helen's final act was more than a will. It was a declaration. A foundation named after Leonard, crafted to support the stepfathers and guardians of blended families, the guys who give their hearts and hands without expecting a parade. This wasn't just money tossed into the wind. It was a carefully planted seed meant to grow a forest of recognition. Leonard gripped the letter like a lifeline and, against his own defenses, allowed the tears to fall, not from grief, but from the fierce pride of being seen. Justice, he thought, often whispers softly rather than bellowing loudly. It lives in letters hidden between the pages, in actions buried beneath the silence, and in truths that break through when everything else crumbles. In that fragile moment, Leonard understood. Helen never left him behind. She had simply saved the best act for last. He skipped the courtroom battles and the angry phone calls to Helen's children. He didn't march back into the house demanding his due. Instead, he folded her letter with care, drew a deep breath, and chose to fight, not for vengeance, but for those who love in the quiet shadows. The unsung fathers, the second husbands, the silent champions. The Leonard Trust sprang to life. Within weeks, its mission laser-focused. Scholarships for stepfathers who bridge broken families but are erased from the story. The applications poured in like a flood, men of every walk, from hard hat to chalkboard, from wheel to wheel. Leonard shook their hands, heard their stories, and for the first time in decades, the weight of loneliness lifted from his shoulders. And through it all, he remained in the house Helen left him, quietly, legally, the same one her children once thought was theirs. Weeks later, they returned, swaggering with entitlement, waving eviction papers like flags of conquest. Clara rolled in with a realtor, ready to slap a for sale sign on the front lawn, no knock required. But the gate creaked open, and there sat Leonard, cool as the other side of the pillow, tea in hand, a folder of legal firepower waiting beside him. "Please, sit down," he said, voice calm but knowing, "though I doubt this will drag on. Their chuckles echoed until Leonard handed over the truth. Trust deeds, Helen's sharp signature, notarized paperwork sealing their fate. Silence crashed down like a curtain. Claire went ghost white. Mitchell stared at a foundation brochure with 0 traces of his name. Andrew paced like a man who'd lost everything in a poker game. Leonard didn't yell or smirk. He stood tall, locking eyes. Money can be handed down, he said softly. But character? That's forged in fire. No one argued. They left, tails between their legs. Later that night, Leonard wandered his hallway of memories, photos capturing joy and quiet moments. Some faces had faded from his world, but the picture of him and Helen on the porch still glowed warmly. He placed her letter in a frame, not as a trophy, but a whisper. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet courage to stand when the world expects you to fall, to build when all else crumbles.